as we began Black History Month, I made some commitments about what we would do during the month because we were not able to be as organized this year as we had in years past, and to be able to identify Black speakers to share stories for the reflection period. And Duane Taylor heard me saying that on the first Sunday in February and responded. And so Duane is going to bless us with a reflection this morning. And I know that Duane is very well known to many of you, but perhaps not to all of you. So Duane, I wonder if you would do just a brief introduction of yourself before you offer your reflection, if you haven't already intended to do that.
Okay, great. I actually did intend to do that. So, so you read my mind. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, sounds great.
All right, excellent. Okay, so before we start, my name is Duane Taylor. And for those of you who don't know what I look like, I am a tall Black male. So I'm slim to average build. Some people would say handsome, but I'm much too modest to agree with them. And this story takes place about a year ago. It started a year ago and it's ongoing. Right? And there's no ending yet. And it's not because I waited until last minute, it's just because there's no ending. So I'll be using the word crazy a few times. And that's not coming from a place of ableism, because I identify as a crazy person because I have very severe OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. And, you know, crazy just feels like the right word to describe it. I don't mean it pejoratively. So to set the scene, I live and go to school at York University. And this story starts last summer. It was Victoria Day, a warm, sunny afternoon, and my parents had come over to the apartment to drop off some crates of water. So I live on the upper floor and I have to take the elevator to get downstairs. I press the button, wait for a few seconds, and it opens. Inside is a middle-aged white woman. The very first thing she says is, "Absolutely not. No friggin' way. You're not getting in this elevator." Now, friggin' is not the word she used, but this is church, so that's as close to it as I'm going to get. For about 10 seconds, I'm thinking that it's a COVID thing, right? Because we've all had those moments in the last few years. You know, somebody gets too close to you, you don't feel comfortable, you want them to get 6 feet away. We've all been there. But then I noticed that she's wearing a mask and I'm also wearing a mask, and there are 2 people allowed in the elevator, and she's only one person in the elevator, so, this shouldn't be a problem. I tell her, she doesn't have to be so rude, whereupon she says, "Don't talk to me like you know me, frig off." And that's when I knew that I was dealing with a Karen. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term Karen, in the past few years, the term Karen has been used to describe a certain kind of white woman who attempts to weaponize the system against people of color, particularly Black people. So that was the start of the situation that has been going on for almost 9 months. It's been very tiring, but I thought, you know what? This could be an excellent opportunity to discuss the nature of racism. So this reflection is called Lessons in Racism from Elevator Karen. So getting back to my apartment, elevator Karen started to yell and swear and scream and shout. So I did what anyone in the 21st century would do. I started to record her on my phone. And she didn't like that one bit. So she started swearing even more than she had. And she did the thing that Karens are famous for doing, threatening to call the police. So I let her go on her way, and I gave her a few minutes to clear out of the lobby so I wouldn't run into her when I went downstairs to get the water from my parents. So after some time passed, I went downstairs where she was waiting for me. She was on the phone and she said, oh, here he is now. He's Black. He has a beard. He's dressed in gray, before she literally ran out the back exit. Of course, she didn't tell the cops that I was handsome, but whatever. So I went outside and spoke to my parents and said, this crazy woman wouldn't let me in the elevator. I mean, it was crazy. This whole thing was crazy. So I got the water and I went back upstairs and I called the school security. And they said, stay inside my room to avoid another confrontation. And the police were already on their way. And I said, what? The police are already on their way? And then I remembered, oh yeah, that's right. She said she's going to call the police. So a few minutes later, there was a polite but firm knock on the door. Hi, Duane Taylor, Toronto Police. Coming, just one sec, I said, and I took a deep breath and got ready to talk to the police officer. I opened the door and there were 6 of them. Well, I found out later it was 5 police officers and 1 security officer. But when I opened the door, I just saw a row of uniforms lining down the hallways. So this is where we have our first lesson about racism, the difference between good Black people and bad Black people. Now, society has 2 ways of seeing Black people, good Black people and bad Black people. You might say, you can make this distinction about any group of people, regardless of race. Do good things, you're a good person. Do bad things, and you're a bad person. But the specific difference with Black people is that it doesn't have anything to do with behavior. Black people are Black people who make white people uncomfortable, and those are the bad Black people. Whereas good Black people do not make white people uncomfortable. And society has ways of dealing with Black people who make white people uncomfortable. If you want a good example of this, consider Martin Luther King. Now, he was someone who objectively did a lot of good things, but at the same time, he was a Black person who made white people uncomfortable. So that made him a bad Black person, and he was dealt with appropriately. So bearing all of that in mind, let's get back to the hallway full of police officers. So guess what kind of Black person I wanted to come across as? You guessed it. Hey, officers, how are you? How's it going? And this leads us to lesson number 2 about racism, which is that privilege is important. Now, I know everyone is sick to death of hearing about white privilege and blah, blah, blah. It's bad, I get it, but hear me out. So remember at the beginning how I said that I was a tall Black male? Well, I had to identify myself that way because I don't sound the way most people think a Black male would sound. Okay, well, maybe Carlton from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but anyway. So the way that I talk doesn't make anyone feel uncomfortable. In fact, it sounds neutral. Actually, okay, this is church and this is Sunday, so let's be completely truthful. I sound like a white male. And more importantly, I sound like the right kind of white male. North American, middle class, educated, but not threateningly so. Handsome, yeah, but other people say that, not me. And that means in some ways, I also benefit from white privilege because when I start talking, people immediately think, oh, he's not like those other Black people. He's a good Black person. He doesn't have an accent. He doesn't talk from the streets. He doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. He's not a bad Black person. So getting back to the half dozen police officers outside my door, I gave them my version of events. And they said, yeah, we believe you. And I thought, well, that was easy. And the lead officer said, something came up. We believe your story. Now remember this because it'll be important later on. Elevator Karen had told the police that she was a woman living by herself and she'd heard there was someone assaulting women on York campus and so didn't want to let me on the elevator. And while I guess it's true that York has had that issue for around 30 years, I haven't been going here that long. I'm not the historical York predator. So after the police exchanged some information, they did some canvassing, we concluded our business. We said very pleasant goodbyes and went about our days. So remember at the beginning when I identified myself as a crazy person with very severe obsessive compulsive disorder? Well, that means if something's bothering you, it makes it very hard to think about anything else. I absolutely did not want to run into Elevator Karen again. So I stayed in for the rest of the day and the rest of the night and the next day and the next night until I finally ran out of food. And then I stayed in for another day and then another night because I couldn't stand the thought of running into her again. So in the middle of the night, I decided to sneak out of my room to go grocery shopping at the only place you can go grocery shopping in the middle of the night, Shoppers Drug Mart. So I snuck out of my room. I pressed the elevator button, hope it's empty, hope it's empty, hope it's empty. No one's inside. Okay, good. Now I press the down button, hope no one's inside, hope no one gets in, hope no one gets in. Okay, 3, 2, 1. The elevator doors open. Take a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, look outside. No one's in the lobby. Oh, thank goodness. So I'm out of the building for the first time in days, and I'm heading to the bus stop when I become aware of this big thing blocking the sidewalk. I look up, and it's Elevator Karen. And my actual words were, "Oh my God, you've got to be kidding me." Her actual words were ones that I cannot repeat here, but they can be summed up as swearing, screaming, and shouting. I went to the bus stop, and although Elevator Karen had previously told the police how afraid she was, she stood about 10 feet away from me, alone, in the middle of the night, staring at me until the bus came 7 minutes later. I went to Shoppers, and I can't recall what I bought. The next day, there was a firm but polite knock on the door. Duane Taylor, Toronto Police. It was only 2 police officers this time because Elevator Karen had told them something to the effect that I was stalking her and I had posted things about her on social media. Okay, now I'm sure that was the last thing you expected her to accuse me of, but I was even more surprised than you were because I haven't even been on social media for years. And anyway, she didn't know what my name was, so why would she think that? And this brings us to our next lesson about racism, and that is that racism is not an opt-out system. So remember earlier when I was saying, I'm sure you're sick and tired of hearing about white privilege and racism and blah, blah, blah. Well, Black people don't go on and on about those things for fun. We go on and on about those things because we have to deal with them, and we can't just choose to not engage with them. So in the same way that I can't say, well, this is ridiculous. I mean, I'm not on social media. I'm not speaking to the police, and just not talk to the police without having consequences is the same way that I can't just walk into Shoppers Drug Mart, for instance, and not have security follow me around just to make sure I'm not shoplifting. Because racism isn't just one person being mean to another. It's a system, one of many systems that we all live in, whether it's a system of money or gender or nationality or class. Systems are by definition systemic, which means that they are big and have lots of moving parts. They're bigger than any single part, but they are still made of parts. Now remember that. So getting back to the police in the hallway, the second set of police in the hallway, we exchanged statements and then exchanged pleasantries and then exchanged very pleasant goodbyes. And this is a scene that would be repeated not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5 times, but 6 times. And that's not including the times that she called the police and security, but they didn't come to bother me. Elevator Karen's allegations included, but were not limited to, me sleeping in her hallway, me kicking down her door, me attacking her family and calling her presumably white family the N-word, me dating her next door neighbor, and in conjunction with this neighbor, pounding down her doors and threatening her, and also being friends with her other next door neighbors, and then pounding on her doors and hiding in her room, and then pounding on her walls when she was talking to her cat. Of course, she has a cat. Anyway, as I think you have all gleaned, Elevator Karen, as it turns out, is also a crazy person. And I don't say this out of a place of judgment. I am a crazy person myself. And at times, my craziness has disrupted the lives of those around me. I am like her. She is like me. And I don't blame her for that. And I'm not angry with her about that. Don't get me wrong. It's frustrating. It's stressful. It's depressing. But I understand her as I would like people to understand me when I am being frustrating and stressful and depressing. And this is another thing in lesson racism. It goes deep. Because Elevator Karen is undoubtedly delusional, possibly hallucinating, but she still knows in her heart of hearts that Black men are dangerous and that she can call a system to deal with them, regardless of the trivialities of her complaints. There was a quote from someone that I can't recall about how being Black means living in the prison of the white imagination. And it doesn't matter what you're individually like, you are a Black person, good Black person, bad Black person. You are always living under the concept of the way white people imagine you. So about all these unfounded police calls, you're probably thinking, well, surely it's illegal to make false claims. Well, yes and no. It is a crime, but not the crime against the person who the claims are being made against. It's a crime against the police for having wasted their time. Because technically speaking, if you haven't committed a crime, you won't have problems with the police. Breonna Taylor, that's all I'm going to say. So at first, York University was not being very helpful with this for about 3 months. They kept hemming and hawing, and the administration kept saying there wasn't anything actionable. So after one incident in which she yelled at me in front of the building and said, "Why would a girl attack a big fat black guy? I already have a boyfriend. I don't want to be your girlfriend." She, again, forgot handsome. I sent a very, very bad black person email to the vice provost of students, and she got involved. And when she followed up, the school finally decided that there was an issue. They called the university tribunal, which is kind of like a court hearing. In the first part, they issued elevator care and a no contact order. And she called the police twice after that anyway. The second part, they upheld the no contact order and said she had to move out of the building. She didn't move out of the building and called the cops 3 more times after that. And this was during the Christmas holidays, by the way. So thanks to the lockdown, I actually saw the police more times than I saw my friends and family. Another lesson in racism, it doesn't take a holiday. It's kind of like the coronavirus. It doesn't really care if you're tired of it. It has to still be dealt with. So by this point, I had gone from being a crazy person to a capital C, capital P crazy person. I didn't leave my apartment. I was eating less and less so I wouldn't have to leave to buy food. I was like Howard Hughes without the money and also without a haircut. And that's why there's no video today. Racism is a prison. Now, remember when I said earlier that systems were made of parts? Well, systems are hard to change, but parts aren't, especially if people are willing to change them. As you are well aware by now, I am a tall black man, and that means I've had multiple interactions with the police, even before this. In fact, that actually wasn't even the first interaction I'd had with police that year, because there was a whole situation with a bus earlier that winter. But one thing I noticed about the police this time was how great they all were. They were friendly. They de-escalated the situation. They gave me advice. The first set of police officers even went outside to my parents' car to apologize and explain the situation. I really felt that they had taken the lessons learned from the racial events of the last few years and tried to improve. It was great. They were great. I love them. I feel like I've made a bunch of new friends because we all know each other now by first name. And I thought, upon realizing this, I thought, wait, is this what being white feels like? Like knowing that you have the system helping you and people with guns wanting to make sure you're safe. And then I thought, I get it now. If this is what my interactions with the police were like, if all of them were like this, and the interactions with everybody that I knew, if they were like this, then I would question anyone who told me differently. In fact, I wouldn't even want to believe that things could be different. So I just want to say to the white people who have questioned the system and who have asked the tough questions of yourself, congratulations, because I didn't realize how hard it would be to do that. I didn't realize how good privilege feels. And to other Black people, it feels amazing. I hope you get to try it sometime. So this brings us to January 24th of this year. So if you recall, the saga began on May the 24th, so it was kind of like an anniversary. There was a firm but polite knock on the door. Duane Taylor, Toronto Police. Sigh. I open the door, only this time there aren't 6 police officers or even 2. There's just 1. I smile, he smiles, we exchange pleasantries, and I confirm that I am Duane Taylor, and he gives me a sheet of paper. It's a court summons because I have had a peace bond applied to me against by Elevator Karen. So a peace bond is kind of like a restraining order. Elevator Karen was alleging, among other things, that I had threatened with breaking her quote unquote pretty face, following her to work with my friends, attacking her in front of the building, and repeatedly threatening her with rape and sexual assault. And she also said that this had been going on for 3 years. Now, before you worried, I'm not concerned about the outcome of this trial because I have the school on my side, school security on my side, and most importantly, the police on my side. The sergeant himself actually called me up to give me advice about how to deal with the court case and to sympathize about how ridiculous it was. A constable even tried to actually get the case withdrawn before the court date. Like I said, I love these people. I'm not worried, but still, it has been an exhausting 8 months or 9 months or 3 years. I don't know anymore. However long it's been going on, I can't tell. This is eternal. Racism is eternal. Racism has always been around. That's another lesson from Elevator Karen. And another lesson is that racism costs everyone, even Elevator Karen, because after the school found out she hadn't obeyed their order and kept harassing me, earlier this week, the school suspended her from school and the premises for 4 years, effectively, immediately. And once the suspension is over, she's not allowed to live on school property ever again. And I know the obvious response is to cheer, but I'm not happy that happened. I'm not happy that someone's inability to address their problems has cost them their home and their education. She's apparently in her 50s, so she doesn't have many more second chances. But don't get me wrong. I'm glad that it was made clear that this was unacceptable, and that was an appropriate punishment that was handed out. So at the very least, if she doesn't get help, she can't keep doing this on the school campus anymore. That's what everyone deserves, the privilege to feel safe. But as I said before, the situation isn't over, and so there's not really an ending to this story. And I think that's actually a good thing, because getting back to Martin Luther King, one of the things that always annoys me about movies set in the civil rights era is the way they always end on a positive, triumphant note. Like, that's it. Equality is achieved, and we can all feel good, and racism is solved in 1965. No more problems after that. And it's not really like that. That's just one of the things that the system tells itself, so it doesn't have to ask itself tough questions. So in light of that, I will leave you on an unsettling note. So in the course of the peace bond process, I was given access to police records of the incidents between Elevator Karen and myself. Remember way back during the first incident, I said that the police said something had come up, so they believed my story. Well, according to this document, what the police found was that since 2016, Elevator Karen had made previous false complaints about men of color bothering her. She had done this 26 times. 26 times. At least 26 other people have been through this with just this one woman at just York University in just the last 6 years. So racism was not one with her getting suspended. It is a system. Systems have parts, but they are not going to change themselves. Thank you for listening.